Welcome to another edition of our treatment of the International Sunday School lesson. Today's lesson is entitled Taming the Tongue, and it's taken from James, the 3rd chapter, verses 1 through 12. It's for the summer quarter, lesson number 12 for August the 23rd, 2020. Now, a little background information. Dr. Gill said about this chapter many years ago that the apostle cautions against censorshipness and reproving others with a magisterial air. And that's one of the main themes of what we're going to be talking about today. And it's so easy for those of us in church, especially those of us who from time to time get behind a pulpit, to take an attitude that we should not take, that will lead us down into condemnation. Jesus was talking about folks with that same air back in his day. And in Matthew, the 23rd chapter, verses 1 through 5, it says, "Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, 'The teachers of the law and the Pharisees sat in Moses' seat. So you must be careful to do everything they tell you. But do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them.' Everything they do is done for people to see." Now, friends, those of us in the ministry, those of us teaching Sunday schools, those of us being ushers, those of us being elders, those of us being deacons in the church, we need to be very careful that we do not end up and fall into that class. And that specific mindset is one of the principal focuses of what Brother James is talking about in our lesson today. James, the 3rd chapter, verses 1 and 2. "Not many of you should become teachers, my fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. We all stumble in many ways. Anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect, able to keep their whole body in check." So, James is cautioning people that when you stand up and teach, it puts way more responsibility on you. Those of us who are in the ministry, we have to be so careful in how we conduct ourselves, what we publicly say. We have to be so careful what photographs are made of us, what we say, how we conduct ourselves, how we interact with people. Because if we say the wrong thing, it brings a bad light on the gospel, on the church, on the mission of the church in this world. We have to be very, very attentive to detail in making sure that we don't give offense in what we're doing. We need to be careful how we treat people, how we discuss things with people. I will never forget. I went to go get my car worked on. And the guy did not do exactly like I wanted him to, or I thought he should have done. And I mean, I did not cuss or anything, but I chewed and talked to the guy rough and did not recognize that I had went to school with him, to high school with him. And after I got finished making a real jerk out of myself, the guy says, "Well, are you still preaching? We went to high school together." And I mean, it convicted me, because I realized at that point, because of the way I had acted, was a bad reflection on the ministry. You know, Paul was talking to the Romans. Romans 2nd chapter, verses 21 through 24. You then who teach, do you not teach yourself? You who preach against stealing, do you steal? You who say that people should not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? You who abhor idols, do you rob temples? You who boast in the law, do you dishonor God by breaking the law? As it is written, God's name is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you. When we act and say and run our mouth and say the wrong things, we bring dishonor to God, because we name the name of Christ. So we have to be really careful what we do in this world. Okay, James, the 3rd chapter, verses 3 and 4. When we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. And that holds true for these massive Navy aircraft carriers. Those things look like cities out there on the ocean. If you've ever seen one out there, it stunned me when I went to Florida when I was a kid, seeing a carrier off the coast of Florida. It was huge. And yet it's just a rudder. A guy has got the steering wheel and turns that steering wheel and controls that massive ship. And what we post in social media, or what we say to someone, can have far-reaching consequences, and can even have far-reaching consequences in people we don't know. It hasn't been but just several years ago that Edgar Madison Welch was reading in social media about the fake news about the sex ring, the child sex slave ring in the pizzeria in Washington, D.C. And that 29-year-old North Carolina boy got a bunch of guns, got them in his car, drove to Washington, D.C., pulled one of his guns out inside that pizzeria and fired a weapon, thinking that he was saving some children's lives when he did it. And he ended up taking a chance of killing innocent people, and the guy has ended up doing 4 years in jail over that. And that came from just foolishness getting posted in social media. Friends, let me tell you something. We have a responsibility to the truth. We have to really check out what we say, because people will go out and do things and threaten people and hurt people and end up destroying their lives over stupid stuff that we say. That unbridled tongue that keeps talking can do so much damage and can even result in people losing their lives over foolishness. And friends, as people of God, we have a responsibility to the truth. We need to be careful. If you do not know it for a fact, keep your mouth shut. All of this idle talk and running your mouth can do so much damage. Remember that little wheel inside that great big ship that steers it one way or the other. You can say kind words and truthful words and avoid a horrible consequence. And you can run your mouth, say the wrong thing, be speaking falsehoods and bearing false witness and stirring strife, and you can end up getting somebody killed that is totally innocent of anything. Maybe out there doing a really good thing and struggling to do the best they possibly can, and you can get them killed. Okay? James 3rd chapter, verses 5 and 6. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boast. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue is also a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, lets the whole course of one's life, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. Let me tell you something. You can sit there and set things in motion that cannot be undone. You can say the wrong thing and it end up in gunfire. You can say the wrong thing and it end up in adultery. You can say the wrong thing and it end up totally destroying a ministry that has been in operation for years and decades, and you can destroy it in just a matter of very few words at the wrong time to the wrong person. It's just like a forest fire. You can flip a cigarette out of a speeding car on a hot, dry day, driving through the forest, and you can completely destroy thousands of acres, cost multiple people their lives from that one careless act. A small spark can do enormous damage. You can sit there and leave a hair blower or hair curling iron. You can leave a curling iron plugged in at a big massive hotel and have that whole thing burned to the ground. And that's just like that foolish talk. Small, short, foolish talk, inspired of the devil, can do enormous damage. We have to guard our tongue. James, the 3rd chapter, verses 7 and 8. All kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. Only the Lord can tame your tongue. Psalms 12 and 3. May the Lord silence all flattering lips and every boastful tongue. Let me tell you something. That evil tongue is one of the things that the Lord hates. They are an abomination to Him. Proverbs 6:16 through 19. There are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to Him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush into evil, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community. If you're getting on social media and running your mouth and just stirring up strife as much as you possibly can, you are an abomination in the sight of God. It is just that simple. And it is my job to speak the truth, and it's also my job to watch Donnie Bryson, to make sure I'm not doing that kind of thing. And I have to guard myself all the time. There are a ton of times that I get the urge just to jump up and say this, that, and the other. And the Lord's been drawing me back and holding me back from running my big mouth, because it's not what He called me to do. He called me to preach the gospel. He called me to preach the truth. He called me to preach living right, doing right, acting right, treating people right. That's what God called me to do. He did not call me to go out and correct everybody on social media or stir up to see how many postings I could get and followings I can get by stirring up a big hoop-de-doo on social media. And He did not call you to do that neither. Okay? James, 3rd chapter, verses 9 and 10. With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. Oh my. Listen to what James is saying. You should not be cursing people who are made in the image of God and think that you're praising and God is doing you any good. Because it ain't. Genesis, first chapter, 26th verse. And this is why we have to treat people right. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. We are all made in the image of God. The white person, the black person, the Native American, the Asian American, the little bitty child, the old person in the old folks' home. We are all in God's image. The poor person, the rich person. We are all made in God's image. We have got to treat everyone fairly. We have got to be nice and kind and tender-hearted with everyone. Because everyone is made in the image of God. James, the 3rd chapter, verses 11 and 12. Can both fresh water and salt water flow from the same spring? My brothers and sisters, can a fig tree bear olives or a grapevine bear figs? Neither can a salt spring produce fresh water. You can't run those cursings and blessings out of the same mouth, because you've contaminated your mouth with your words. You spout out lies and deceit and hatefulness and cursing out of that mouth and blaspheming and going on, and you run that mouth. You have contaminated and defiled your mouth, and you cannot offer praise to God and it mean anything. Okay? Now, folks, in conclusion, I just want to reiterate what I've said during the lesson, that we need to be really careful what we say, both in person and in social media. I tell you what, now I went through a period, and this is just a matter of me confessing a little bit, but I went through a period of time where I thought it was my place to try to straighten everybody out and get on there and just fuss and fume and argue and go on with people on various social media platforms. And the Lord got a hold of me and put me under conviction. I mean, here I am, a man of God. I'm a minister. It is not my place to get out here and argue over politics and stuff like that. It is, I mean, I have a right to vote, but that's it. Especially a minister. Because when we're called into ministry, our job is to preach the gospel. We are representing the Lord Jesus Christ. And we need to reach out and try to get as many people saved of whatever political conviction they are. We need to get every one of them saved that we possibly can. And if we alienate people by fussing and fuming and going on with people, if we alienate those people, then they will not listen to us preach to them. And so let me just reiterate what the Lord told me deep in my heart, that if you're going to be a preacher of the gospel, be a preacher of the gospel. You're not called to be anything but that. Okay? And be honest. Be honest, be kind-hearted, treat people with respect. Well, friends, good Lord willing, I'll be back with you next weekend.